Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with the Arab Revolution of 2011. The Arab countries are going through turmoil. They're going through revolutions, wanting to throw the rulers. Well, last time we spoke, we told you we were not sure what Hosni Mubarak will end up doing. Well, definitely that same night we spoke, he had decided that he will step down, and he did. Now, reports out there that he is in a very dangerous health condition. The president of Tunisia, some people say he is in a coma. He had a stroke, that's what they said, and he is in the hospital. Well, I guess it does happen if you lose a country and you're no longer the president of that country. So you might wonder, ladies and gentlemen, what is exactly going on in these Arab countries? These rulers have been there for many, many years, and I guess the longest sitting Arab leader would be Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. As a matter of fact, they had some demonstrations there in Libya, and news report said that there are about 13 people died, and of course it could be more. I don't believe we will see what took place in Cairo. I don't believe it will happen in Libya, as the Libyan regime will survive this one, even probably if he has to kill half of the country. He has a pretty good security system around him. So I don't believe, and one of the things that he did, of course, Muammar Gaddafi has always been a comical guy. Last week, when some people wanted to go down in the streets and actually demonstrate against the government, he actually said that he will go down to the street with people to demonstrate against the government. It's not a joke. And I guess he is with the people. But there are demonstrations, supposedly pro-democracy demonstrations, because the Arab world is not democratic, lives under dictatorship. So now we are bringing democracy to the Middle East, or probably the people in the Middle East have decided that they want a taste of democracy. We've seen that in Tunisia, in Egypt. Today in Bahrain, as a matter of fact, there was many, many people out there in the streets demanding the very much what everybody else wants, the removal of the leader. Now, Bahrain, as most of the Middle East, actually, if we can put a map of the Middle East, most of these countries, if we go to the larger map, here we go, a lot of these countries, ladies and gentlemen, were born after World War I with what was called back then the Sykes-Picot Agreement, when the Ottoman, or everything that you're looking at, very much everything, was part of the Ottoman Empire, which the British and the French went to war against, and they won, and therefore they divided the areas amongst them, where England controlled few of these areas, and France, they very much divided the pie amongst themselves, and everybody was, snatching this country and this country there. And eventually all these countries were given their, you might say, freedom, but actually they were the powers that be at that time had signed or assigned these families to rule in all of these countries. So like if we, They did it in Iraq, they did it in Jordan, they did it in Saudi Arabia, they did it in all of the Gulf areas. They did it and they had nothing but families. Now, in certain places, now Bahrain, it would be exactly where you see Iran is, but cross the Gulf, and you will see Bahrain right there. It's a very little piece in the middle of the Gulf there. That other one is Qatar, which is like that little thing sticking in the water. Now, all of these countries were made countries by England by giving some of these families who became later on known as the royal families of these countries. Well, in the case of Bahrain, it happened that the majority of the population were Shiite Muslims, and England very much assigned a Sunni royal family, or a Sunni family that became royal family of Bahrain later on, and they ruled the country. Saudi Arabia is very much the same. They had given that to a royal family. Iraq. Now, back, if you heard of Lawrence of Arabia, actually after the First World War and after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, the Hashemite family, which was the Sharif Hussein of Mecca, he made a deal with the British, and they signed many agreements with him to make him that if he joined in, if the Arabs would join in on the side of the British and the French to kick out the Ottomans, the Turks, out of their areas, that those countries, the Arab-speaking country, the Arabic-speaking countries, will be assigned to the Sharif Hussein of Mecca, and he will be made the Khalifa on those countries or on those areas. Well, things really did not go the way the British promised, but they had given him Syria, Iraq, and they made his youngest, his middle brother, Abdullah, they made him a governor of Jordan. And if you go to the other map, you will see where Jordan is. And so there is Jordan right there. Now, there was really nothing called Jordan before that. It was the River Jordan that we all are aware of, and it was Palestine. Now, keep in mind, and this is something that people, these days don't like to actually talk about this, but keep in mind that Palestine actually was known as the region east of the river and west of the river. It wasn't just west of the river as we know it now. Now, the people who lived in that area were very much the same people on east of the river and west of the river. Now, west of the river, this whole thing was called Palestine, and now it's called Israel. And so Israel have decided, the powers, the Zionist powers have decided way back before the Ottoman Empire was defeated, that they wanted a country in Palestine. And actually, the country that they wanted, they extended it almost to Iraq, and it takes some of Egypt and very much all of Jordan. That's what they called Israel, and that's the country, that the kingdom that they wanted to have. Now, it's what is happening. Okay, since that time, Syria, which was given to one of the sons, the royal family became royal, the Hashemites. It was given to Faisal. He was made king on Syria, but he did not last. The Syrians very much decided, no, we liberated ourselves. We don't need someone coming from the deserts of Saudi Arabia to become a king over us. Now, in Iraq, you see Iraq right there to the right. There was actually the same, very much the Hashemite family. They also were crowned a king, King Faisal II there. He was crowned as a king on Iraq, but he did not last either. Actually, he was killed in 1958 by a military coup led by two military officers. One is Abdul Karim Qasim, and the other is, I believe, Abdul Salam Arif. Now, Then it was Jordan. Now, Jordan at that time, it was about to also become a republic, because it's just this idea of having these royal families in these areas did not jive too well with the people who were in those areas. But the United States, and as a matter of fact, it's not the United States, but England, through the with cooperation with Israel, which they had allowed the England to actually fly thousands of soldiers into Jordan, and at the same time, America flew thousands of Marines into Lebanon to basically stop both of these countries from becoming more of an Iraq and more of a Syria. Now, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, this gets a little bit complicated, but try to follow with us here. So Iraq became a republic back in 1958. Syria was a republic already. Jordan was a kingdom, and when the winds of change in 1958, the British came to the help of Jordan, and the Americans came to the help of Camille Chamon in Lebanon, to very much stop one thing that was going on back there in 1958, which is Egypt and Syria united. If you notice, Egypt and Syria, they are on two sides. One is to the north and east of Israel. The other one is to the south and west of Israel. So it was very much, and Israel was in a pincer, even though the forces and the powers of these two countries were not really any match to Israel. We've seen what Israel has done in 1948, and we've seen what they have done in 1967. So back in 1958, even Syria and Egypt were not even a match to the military power of Israel. Now, Iraq, when in 1958, Abdul Karim Qasim wanted to become the president of Iraq, Abdul Salam Arif actually his idea was to unite Iraq with Syria and Egypt because they were one country. Now, if they succeeded, and they had succeeded in Jordan, then you would have one Arab country united, actually surrounding Israel. If Lebanon went that way, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt. If they went the way of Jamal Abdel Nasser, which he wanted to unite those countries together under the United Arab Republic, he was only successful in doing that with Syria. Abdul Karim Qasim did not want to go with Egypt because he wanted to be an independent president of Iraq. So he allied himself with the communists there in Iraq. And Abdul Salam Arif, who was his comrade and his partner in this military coup, he got the shaft and was actually very much eliminated from the power base there at that time. Now, he came back, but we're not going to go into what happened. Let's stick with 1958. Now, in 1958, in Iraq, when those two were it was two different ideologies. You can come back to me now. Those two, there were different ideologies in Iraq and I'm not really sure which one I am on, but I'm going to stay with this one here. Okay. In Iraq in 1958, one wanted to join in with Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt to unite Iraq with Syria. The other one, he wanted to be the president of Iraq and did not want to join the United Arab Republic. So he wanted to be an independent. He wanted to be his own man. Did not want to go under Jamal Abdel Nasser's leadership. So he aligned himself with the communists. Demonstrations, thousands of people went to the streets of Baghdad at that time in support of Abdul Karim Qasim because they wanted him to become the president and etc., because if he became the president, then he will not unite with Egypt. Guess who instigated those demonstrations on the streets of Baghdad, where hundreds of thousands of people went out to the streets of Baghdad to actually voice their support to Abdul Karim Qasim, who did not want to be part of the United Arab Republic. Yes, you guessed it right. It was the Israelis. Mossad at that time, which they still do, but at that time, they had hundreds, if not thousands, of Mossad agents inside Iraq from the Iraqi Jewish community that was still in Iraq, because not all Jews left Iraq. Many of them remained there, and the Mossad and the Zionist organization had infiltrated those Jewish communities in Iraq for probably about 50 years prior to that. So they had a strong base there. Now, why would Israel, and even though Abdul Karim Qasim was not a friend of Israel, and he even, he was an enemy of Israel, but why would Israel actually send its people to stir up the people on the streets of Iraq, of Baghdad, to support this guy who's their enemy? Well, very simple. Because if they did not do that, and the people did not come out in support of that guy, then the country was going to be united with the United Arab Republic, and then you will have Iraq, Syria, and Egypt. Well, if that happens, it will only be a matter of time before the Jordanian regime would fall. Then you will have the whole thing, if you can just very quickly put that map back, and just to show you. And at that same time, Lebanon, the other one, Lebanon was having the same kind of Jamal Abdel Nasser's of Egypt. He had a lot of supporters, and things were going his way for a while. Well, the United States interfered. England interfered in Jordan. Iraq did not go the United Arab Republic way, and actually that union between Egypt and Syria did not last long. They separated and they became their own countries, and what happened is the rest of the history. Okay. Now, in 1967, if you look at the map where it says Israel, and you have that kidney-looking thing, which would be that's the West Bank. Now, that is the part where the Palestinians want to have a state, and the Israelis want that whole piece. They don't want to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank or in Gaza, which is that little strip to the left or to the west of Israel there between Israel and Egypt. So the Palestinian state, for 60 years now, the Palestinians have been trying to have a state of their own. Israel is steadfastly standing that they will not have a Palestinian state. They will not permit a Palestinian state to go on in the West Bank. Well, what are they doing in the West Bank? They are building settlements. Now, let me remind everyone, and we do have pictures to show you these settlements they are building all over the West Bank. In the 1970s, there were only 1,100. In 1972, there were 1,100 settlers in the West Bank. The Zionist organization, the World Zionist Organization at that time put out a plan. The plan of that, it was called the Israel Strategies in the 1980s. And also you can find that plan on the internet by actually going and researching Israel's plan, or the Zionist plan for the Middle East. We've talked about this plan many times on the program, and everybody was very much, saying, no, it's not going to happen. Well, let me tell you, what we are witnessing right now in the Middle East is an execution of that plan. Now, let me repeat. What we are witnessing in the Middle East right now is an execution of that plan. You might say, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense. Why would Israel actually remove Hosni Mubarak, who was very much their friend. They signed an agreement. Well, actually, he continued the Sadat agreement with him. He was very much giving the United States everything they needed. He was very much giving everything to the Israelis that they needed. Well, the problem is, it is time to change the map. It is time for the new Middle East that the neocons have talked about when they talked about the clean break, which is Israel must become a superpower, a superior country in the Middle East. You can come back to me now. Now, they're sleeping there in the booth, or they're probably tweeting or working on Twitters or something. Anyway, so what happened is, when you have Israel, you have the Middle East, you have all of these countries who from the inside. Now, Israel in its plan said, we cannot destroy these countries from the outside by the classical conventional means, but if we work on these fault lines that they identified in every country, they identified those fault lines. In Bahrain, they said, Bahrain today, it is happening. They said that in Bahrain, the majority of the populations were Shiites. At that time, they said 80% of Bahrain were Shiites, 20% Sunnis. That's in late 1970s. Now it's 70-30. It's still, but who's in power? A Sunni Muslim over Shiite Muslims. Now, there was no problem all these years, but the problem or the situation, the fault lines were there. Even though you did not have any earthquakes going on, but the fault line, it doesn't mean the fault lines don't exist beneath the surface. All they had to do is just move those fault lines a little bit. In Iraq, and they said, Iraq must go first. They said it. They said removal of Saddam Hussein's regime from Iraq is an Israeli objective in its own right in the clean break. They said that removal of Saddam Hussein, it will get that fault line in action. They said Iraq will be divided into 3, possibly 4 different countries. What are we noticing now in Iraq? Exactly that. They said you will have a Sunni state, a Kurdish state, you will have a Shiite state, possibly 2, because the Shiites are divided almost in half. Now, who drew that map to put all these different people together in one country? England and France during the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Who drew the maps and put all these people together in Bahrain and got these royal families to be the kings there? Well, he became king not long ago. He was an emir all along, and his family were the emirs. He very much became a king, I guess, 10 years ago or something. Who did that? Britain. The British did. Great Britain did. Now, Saudi Arabia, the same thing. Who put all these, who drew the Sudan the way they drew it? England. Who drew Egypt the way they did? Even though Egypt was a country before the Ottoman Empire was defeated, and it was again a family that the British put there to run Egypt before they even defeated the Ottoman empires. So now the fault lines are there in those countries. All you have to do is work on it. Just for the sake of time, we are going to speed it up a little bit, going back to the settlers, because everything you see in the Middle East revolves around Palestine. Everything you see in the Middle East revolves around Palestine. The Palestinians, now back in 1992 during the Madrid peace conference, Itzhak Shamir was the prime minister, and he came to that peace conference, the Madrid peace conference, and he very much flat out told the Arab delegates there that he was supposedly negotiating with, don't talk about, you want to talk about peace, we'll talk about peace, but don't talk about territories. Leave the territories alone. And he very much told reporters from Ma'ariv, the Israeli newspaper at that time, that, and it was reported by the LA Times and many other newspapers at that time, he very much told them that he's going to drag, we'll get these people talk, we'll talk to them about peace, we'll drag it for 10 years, and by that time we will have 500,000 Jewish settlers in the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Now, what is Judea and Samaria? That is the West Bank. That is Nablus. That is Hebron. That is Jerusalem. That is Jenin and Tulkarim and all these, the mountainous areas. Now, they did say in the 70s, the World Zionist Organization did say that our survival in Israel depends upon populating the mountains in Judea and Samaria. This is way back. And they said, our survival depends on populating the mountains in Judea and Samaria. And they added, now it is empty of the Jewish people. At that time, there was no Jews living in Judea and Samaria in early 70s. In 1972, there were 1,100 settlers living in the West Bank, closer to Jerusalem. Okay? 1992, the settlers movement was still, they were populating the West Bank, but not really in large numbers. They had like about two main, areas, a couple of, there were like mainly three big settlements. Now they have hundreds of settlements. So what did Itzhak Shamir said in 1992? Don't talk about territories. You want to talk about peace? We'll talk about peace, but let's not talk about territories. And then he said, okay, we'll get them busy with these negotiations. We will drag it for 10 years. By that time, we will have, these are his exact words, we will have 500,000 souls living in the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about 1992 until now. There are about 650 to 700,000 Israeli illegal settlers living on the West Bank, living in the West Bank, on the mountains of the in the mountains of the West Bank. So, and if you notice, again, now we did say, look, don't believe the Israelis, don't believe these people, they pray their famous prayer that we will not perform on agreements we do with the Goyim. That's what they do every year, and that's what they do. What do they call that? I forgot. Oh God, I can't believe that but anyway, they do have a prayer. I think they say it in Yom Kippur, which is, I will not perform on agreements made with the Goyim. Let's leave that alone. History by itself and facts on the ground tells us that these people have been agreeing to things and not going through with the agreements that they signed. Now, they dragged it since 1992. In 1995, 1993, we have the Oslo Peace Agreement, where it took the Palestinian revolution, the PLO, was able to actually move its leadership to Palestine in 95, and they were supposed to have a Palestinian state talk about final talks in 1998. It did not happen, because that was the agreement that in 1998 a Palestine will be born. It did not happen. So they kept dragging, and every government of Israel kept dragging its feet on what is going on the ground between them, the negotiations between them and the Palestinians. Yeah, we want to talk peace. We don't have a partner for peace. Yes, let's meet here in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Camp David, in Annapolis, in here, in there, in London, in Madrid. They met all over the world. And every time they have agreements and they sign agreements. And in the meantime, Israel is building settlements on the West Bank. Right now, the Palestinians figured out finally. We have been telling the Palestinian leadership, don't believe these people. Back in 1998, our voices were saying, do the agreement that you signed for final talks with the Palestinian Authority. It did not happen. We said, dissolve the Palestinian Authority at that time because it expired. It is no more a viable option for the Palestinians. In 1998 was supposed to be the year of the final talks, so a Palestinian state was supposed to be born. It did not happen. We said dissolve this. They did not. They continued with this. They continued with the negotiations. Israel kept dragging. It doesn't matter who the prime minister was. They kept dragging their feet until the Palestinians, and if you still remember, a couple of months ago, the Palestinians said, no more of these negotiations. You want to sit down and talk about negotiations. In the meantime, you are consuming our country. You are consuming what we are negotiating on. What we're negotiating about. You're consuming it. So the Palestinians said, we're not going to go sit down there and talk to them unless they stop building these settlements and consuming the land. Well, the United States tried to actually bribe the Israelis with 35 stealth bombers worth billions of dollars, and it would have given Israel the superpower capacity there in that region. It would have given Israel the strike power to strike any country in that region, and that country would not even know where the hit came from. What is that for? Just to freeze building settlements for 90 days so the Palestinians and the Israelis can sit down and negotiate this peace agreement. Israel refused. Well, the Palestinians continued to say, we're not sitting down as long as you are consuming our land. And now, finally, the Palestinian Authority is actually convinced that we cannot continue with this because Israel has no intentions of stopping or freezing building these settlements on the land. So what did the Palestinians do? They went to the world and started getting recognition from the world. They want to bypass the United States because they tried. They told the United States, look, you've been the one supposedly mediating these talks. You are the one who's supposed to be the big brothers to both of us, and make them perform, make the Israelis perform on the agreements that they have. But of course, you know who's controlling this country. It is not this country that is controlling Israel, it's Israel that is controlling this country. We know that. The Zionists are in control of this country, and Israel will get and will have the United States to do whatever Israel wanted to do in the world. They wanted to destroy Iraq. The United States went and destroyed Iraq. Now, the Palestinians, in a last effort, said, well, wait a minute. Israel has no intention. So we've got to go, before it's too late, we've got to go to the world, we've got to go to the United Nations, and if the Palestinians would have the required number of countries to recognize their country, the United Nations will recognize Palestine and Palestine will become a country. Now, there are many steps that they can do. Number one, the easiest step and the quickest step is to go through the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council. Almost every country on the United Nations Security Council would sign yes to a Palestinian state on the 1967 border or borders in Palestine, which is the mountains, the areas where the settlements are. That's where Israel is settling their people. So if they recognize it, then of course, I mean, Israel will do what Israel wants to do. Even if the whole world recognized Palestine, no one can make Israel leave those. But if the whole world decides, look, Palestine must be there and must go on, then you will have a problem. Israel will have a problem actually in maintaining its dignity and maintaining its respectability in the world. So what did they do? The Palestinians, when they found out that, hey, look, the United States might veto a new Palestinian state in the 1967 borders. So what they decided that, hey, look, we'll go through this. If it doesn't work, then we have other options, which is to have the General Assembly actually vote on a Palestinian state. And if the General Assembly votes on it, it will pass. Definitely it will pass. And that is where Israel has a problem. And Israel had to do something before the Palestinians can actually get the chance to get the world around them to go into Palestine and have a Palestinian state. Because it was a fact that the Palestinians were going to the United Nations, and it was a fact that many nations around the world started recognizing a Palestinian state over 1967. Almost all of South America recognized the Palestinian state. All Muslims and Arab countries recognize the Palestinian state. Almost all Southeast Asia recognized the country. Africa. The whole world would have voted, and there was nothing that Israel and the United States could have done to stop a Palestinian state from being born. They had to change the whole thing. They had to change the whole area. How did they do it? Well, everything, these fault lines we talked about, were already underneath and beneath the surface in all of these countries. If Israel can remove Hosni Mubarak out of the way, now, look, let's make one thing perfectly, for those of you who are not getting this theory. The people in Egypt went out and removed a dictatorship that has been oppressing them for over 30 years. There's no question about it. That was in Egypt. It is a people's revolution. All over the Middle East, it is people's revolution with their legit grievances against the government. No question about it. It had to be done now to stop a Palestinian state from being born. How is that? Simple. Change the regime in Egypt. The regime in Egypt was the strongest ally to the Palestinians in the West Bank. It was like Big Brother. It was the one that they went to when they had a problem with the Israelis. They would go to the Egyptians. The Egyptians would interfere with the Israelis and the United States, etc., and they will put things back. There was no one else standing with the Palestinians. Now, of course, all the Arab people are standing with their brothers in Palestine. There is no question about it. Now, the government, each government treated the Palestinians separate based on and depending on their own interest, not the interest of the Palestinians, not the interest of their own, but the interest of their own regimes. That's how they treated the Palestinians. Let's get back to why Israel wanted this. Israel would love nothing more than to have a regime in Egypt that is not friendly to Israel. They don't want a friendly regime and everything is ripe for a not so friendly regime in Egypt, even because, you know, this is a revolution from the people. This is a revolution from people who have been oppressed not for 30 years, but for many, much, much longer than that. Okay. So what happened is, so these countries, if Egypt becomes, let's go back to my train of thought, kind of got cut off there. So you have a lot of people in the Middle East who wanted to be liberated, who wanted to be free. The last thing these people want is to be friendly with Israel. And that will work 100% for Israel. That will work because Israel doesn't want friendly, they don't want, this is what they want to do. They want the regime in Egypt to be more friendly to Hamas than the Palestinian Authority. They want the regime, of course, the regime in Syria is already not. In Iraq is already not. In, you know, they have Al Jazeera, which is a vicious animal that is tearing down what is happening in the Middle East. Tearing down this vicious animal, tearing down the Palestinians in the West Bank. Now you have this Arab revolution. The Palestinians in the West Bank, they're going to be unpopular in the Arab streets. Why? Because they have been negotiating with Israel and they're not getting anything. Now the Arab streets wants to pull back, which leaves the Palestinians in the West Bank an easy target for the Israelis, because they don't want a friendly regime that will interfere with them, because Hosni Mubarak was actually interfering with them. They don't want that. They want a regime that can, and by the way, Iran today, for the first time since the Iranian Revolution, since the Shah was removed, Iran asked to send 2 warships through the Suez Canal. Going somewhere, we don't know where they're going. Of course, they can't go anywhere. But look how this dirty game is being played. Look how this dirty game is being played. Now the Egyptians, because the Supreme Military Council said that we are going to honor all agreements with all countries. Now, did the Iranians, when Mubarak, did they try to pass military ships through the Suez Canal, and the Egyptians said no? But now they want to send, I guess, you know, just let them go into the Mediterranean and then come back, turn around and come back. That's the first time that the Iranians want to flex their muscles through the Suez Canal. Well, the impression that's going to be drawn there that, oh wow, since Mubarak left, then you have this government in Egypt is letting the Iranians pass through there with their warships. Wow. Relationships between Egypt and Israel is going to be strained. It's going to be not a so good of a relationship. And then what happens? You guessed it. Then there's nobody to protect the Palestinian Authority that finds itself squeezed there. Now, Jordan, well, the Zionist agenda has always said that Palestine is in Jordan. And it will not take but few hours to remove the Jordanian regime, the family, from power. Okay? They said that. I mean, this is not something new. They have said that. They have said by the removal of the family, the royal family in Jordan, then you have the Palestinians, who, by the way, make about 70% of the population in Jordan. Well, they're not going to do it now. And by the way, the Jordanian king, King Abdullah, had called, and he was very worried. Look, am I the next one on the line here? Obama told him, no, you're okay. And Obama even sent William Burns, the second man in the State Department, and he sent Michael Mullins, the chief of staff. He sent them both to talk and calm down the fears and the nerves of the Jordanian king just last Sunday. And he made a phone call, personal phone call, to the king, and assured him that he will be okay. And he will be okay. You know, we're not going to see the kind of revolutions that we saw, not yet, because it's not time for that yet. Now, by eliminating Egypt, what will happen is the Palestinian Authority would have not many choices unless it dissolves itself and it goes and it moves out or stays in. They can decide that for themselves and continue with this recognition thing until and move as fast as they can, because Israel is moving as fast as it can to change everything in the Middle East to its advantage. And the Palestinians, because Israel said their own survival depends on populating the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Israel said, and they said this, that all these Arab countries, in their plan, they said this, the plan that I'm talking about, they said this, that in their plan, they actually they talked about all these countries a long time ago, like it's like a deck of cards. And with that, the deck of, that it will fall. Once one card falls, the whole thing would fall. So that's exactly what is happening now. That's exactly what's going on. Now, the Jordan thing, if it stays, it's going to continue like this until they see. Now, if they see they have to do it, they will do it. If they do it, I guarantee you will see population transfer from the west of the River Jordan to the east of the River Jordan. That's what will happen. From the west to the east, which means Israel will not have a Palestinian state in the West Bank. Israel will not allow a Palestinian state in the West Bank. Is it worth it? Now remember, the United States have been working on this change, this regime change. It is not because, as a matter of fact, that is the worst. That is the worst that can happen to the United States with this regime change, because the only way you can actually control the flow of oil to the United States if those regimes in the Arab world remain the same. But it is not good for Israel, because Israel is going to lose its grip on the West Bank, and the Palestinians are going to go for world recognition. Fault lines were already there. Oppression was already there. And that's exactly what will happen. You will see a not so friendly regime in Egypt. And even if it is friendly, they are going to act. And guess what? The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, if we have free elections, they will be in power. Now, Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, they try to scare you that, oh, these are the terrorist Al-Qaeda. No, they're not. But so what if a regime in Egypt, and they will continue with the peace agreement. I have no problem, and I have no, I do not believe that the Egyptians, even if the Brotherhood, or cancel out the peace agreement. The Egyptian military receives $1.5 billion a year in American money, in American assistance. So they're not going to lose that. They're not going to lose the West for nothing. Are we going to see? Yeah, we'll probably see maybe like relationship with Iran, because Mubarak and Iran, they did not see eye to eye, because that's how the United States wanted Mubarak to behave. Now, if the United States wants to go through a period, let's say let's put the Muslim Brotherhood in control in Egypt, the parliament, then we have the conditions that Israel want to have on the ground, suitable for what it wants to have, and don't have time for that. Okay, because we have more important things that we should discuss, and we need to discuss in the last 4 minutes. This thing is very complicated, that you've got to be looking at it from the outside. You cannot be inside the box of Egypt. You cannot be inside the box of Palestine. You cannot be inside the box of Iraq or Syria or Libya or Bahrain or Tunisia. You've got to see this as a whole piece, because there are no other ways to look at it. Why did the United States pay millions of dollars to these organizations in Egypt through the so-called U.S. aid? Many of these organizations are not even registered in Egypt, but they are getting help from U.S. aid, millions of dollars being sent there by the United States to allow for this change, allow for this revolution. Why $15 million of George Soros' money went there to create an organization for Mohammed al-Baradei? Why millions of dollars from Iran went to Egypt? And the Iranians in 2009, they complained to Petraeus. They told him that Egypt is doing this. Iran is spending millions of dollars recruiting people to destabilize the country from within. Petraeus said, let's look at planning a Patriot missile plan around Egypt. The Egyptians said, we are telling you they are destabilizing the country from within, not through missiles. Now, is there an agreement between these powers? Because remember, enemies can and will. Enemies can and will split the pie. Talk about compromises. Well, the situation that's going to be happening in the Middle East, is it suitable for Iran? Yes, it is. It's wonderful news for Iran. Is it suitable for America and the Zionists? Yes, it is. It's wonderful news for Israel and the United States. Of course, when we say the United States, really, we are nothing but a tool in the hand of the Zionists. Now, well, I hope you followed what we talked about, and I hope you realize that something like this does not happen. Look, Tweety Bird did not make this happen. So Twitter and Facebook did not make this happen. Yeah, they might have got people out in the streets more, but this is no Tweety. And I thought I'd throw a pussycat out there, and that's exactly what is happening. Somebody, it's not Tweet, but somebody is doing this. And that somebody, the only beneficiary out of this, will be Israel. Because, you know what? If this revolution was more of an industrial revolution, was it more of an economic revolution? Are we going to have better jobs in Egypt? Are we going to have Egypt grow its own wheat now, as they used to? Because Egyptians used to grow their own wheat. And I always said, if you do not grow the food you eat, if you have to depend on somebody else to feed you, you are not liberated. And you can say whatever you want about whatever revolution you want. If you cannot sustain yourself and stand up on your own 2 feet, you're not liberated. If you still requiring the United States to feed you and clothe you, you're not liberated. I don't care what kind of regime you have. Well, I know I made many people out there probably open their eyes, because you've got to be and have an open mind, especially those people in the Middle East and those people watching us here in the United States of Middle Eastern descent. You've got to do it. You've got to look at what is happening. I know it is emotional. I know it's a great thing to do. I know you think this is it. I do too. And let's hope that this is it. Well, with all this is all we have for you tonight, and we will see you, I guess, next Thursday.